So, we've got a number of questions coming in about risk assessment for non-GMP, how important is having both primary and secondary supply of raw materials. I think one of the things, that the industry is struggling with is figuring out, right, that exactly that, the risk assessment for use of non-GMP, figuring out that justification, right, of what you're putting into your process, and your control strategy. So, I'm curious, first of all, I want to address this in a broad way, and then we can perhaps target it towards some of these audience questions. But have there been any internal changes, right, to operations that you've had to make, right, as this supply chain is growing, we're trying to weigh the quality of our inputs, right, and understand how they impact our product, our CQAs. What general best practices or operational changes have you guys had to implement internally to really navigate, right, this ongoing growth and the broadness of supply, some of the quality challenges in the space, and it's particularly, I would say, maybe as it relates to GMP, right? How you go about integrating or you're establishing your phase appropriate principles. So, Greg, we'll start with you, and then April, we can have you jump in.
Sure. I think you said a couple of really important points, which is one, the risk assessment, and and two, the phase appropriateness, right? And I think holistically, you do have to look at, first of all, what type of material are you looking at? Because an excipient will be treated, very differently from a regulatory perspective than, a traditional raw material or process aid that, is not in your final composition. And then, is this an exploratory early stage clinical trial versus a late stage? And all of that goes into the assessment. And then, really assessing the criticality of the material, which includes its impact to your process, your ability to characterize it, and, ultimately, how does it impact your final product? And then, another layer to that is the source of the material, the consistency, the supplier. So, all of this goes into kind of a comprehensive assessment of what is the impact of that material on your product, what stages your product have, and you have to, it's always a debate. Where do you set the bar for product information and knowledge? And the bar is going to be lower for early stage versus late stage, because it's a trade-off. If you set the bar too high, you're going to take too much business risk, and you might take additional years to get something into the clinic that you might want to learn fast and fail fast. If you set the bar too low, then you're going to put patients at risk. So it's like many things in our industry, a trade-off there.
I was going to say too that the whole concept of phase appropriate, it's one of those, I often like to joke in this industry, we have words that we seemingly understand, but you ask 4 people, 10 people, 20 people what they mean by phase appropriate, and you're going to get 20 different answers, right? So aligning around that, right, I think is perhaps a challenge, I would assume, right, internally, and figuring out, especially as we're still figuring out the role of a lot of these materials in our processes. We still don't know what's important, what's not, per se, right? Am I wrong in making that argument? April, do you have additional comments, on to anything Greg said, or?
I think, I would definitely agree with Yana about what's important versus not. I don't think that we're at a place with these types of products where we understand everything. It's biological processes too, so I don't think we'll ever really be at that point where we understand all the variables that contribute to product quality and safety and efficacy. But there's always that bit of a black box. So it comes down to consistency and control. So for me, the things I've had to adjust coming into these, especially the cell and gene therapy applications of the RNA industry, is really understanding. So I actually plan out GMP supply way ahead because of the lead time issues, but also because I'm aware and I know that across the supply chain, there's going to be some suppliers that need some remedial work because they're just not, a lot of them haven't been audited by a regulatory authority. Some of them may never be, depending on where they are in the process. So it's kind of incumbent on us as the sponsor, the person making the drug, to make sure that they're where they need to be. And that can be quite an onerous process. So I've upped the type of audits and the, like, how in depth we go in audits, so that, you know, like Greg was saying, like, you don't have to be to as high a standard early phase as you do to late stage, but you do need to know where you're at. So walking onto a supplier's manufacturing facility, doing a thorough audit, understanding where the gaps are, having plans in place with them, and knowing that those gaps from a risk-based perspective aren't going to compromise safety. That's what's key. So I think you can work your way around most risk assessments, provided it comes back to, we're not introducing a patient safety risk here. And there's lots of mitigations we can shore up, you know, with internal tests or other things, additional checks, to make sure that we're doing it consistently, but we never want to compromise safety, even in early phase. So,
Greg, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I mean, I think you raised the great point about phase appropriate could mean a lot of different things to different people. So I really do think it helps to put in writing, right, a guideline that, you know, this is what we want for our phase 1 controls, right? These are the environmental controls. These are the process controls. This is the characterization. This is the level of qualification or validation that we're going to do on our tests. And I think the only way to get alignment is to, you know, actually have start with a guideline. And then when you discuss a specific material or vendor, you can, you know, maybe work some specificity around that, but really putting in writing